Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
These were the infamous words radioed back to NASA from the Apollo 13 crew. In April 1970, NASA's Apollo 13 mission was set to be the third journey to land humans on the moon. After the triumphs of Apollo 11 and 12, confidence was high, and the mission was seen as just another step in the exploration of space. But what started as a routine mission turned into a life-or-death struggle, where the world watched as 3 astronauts battled against overwhelming odds to return safely to Earth. The crew of Apollo 13 consisted of Commander James Lovell, Command Module Pilot Jack Swigert, and Lunar Module Pilot Fred Heiss. Their spacecraft was composed of 2 main parts: the Command Module named Odyssey, which housed the astronauts, and the Lunar Module named Aquarius, which was designed to land on the moon. The journey began on April 11, 1970, with a flawless launch from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The crew felt confident as they soared into space, but this confidence would soon be shattered. 2 days into the mission on April 13th, as the spacecraft was about 2,000 miles from Earth, Swigert was asked to perform a routine task: stir the oxygen tank. It was a simple procedure that had been done before, but this time something went terribly wrong. A faulty wire inside one of the oxygen tanks caused a spark, and suddenly there was a loud bang. The entire spacecraft shook violently, and warning lights began to flash. "Houston, we've had a problem," Swigert reported, trying to make sense of what had just happened. This calm statement masked the true terror the astronauts felt as they realized the severity of the situation. The explosion had crippled their spacecraft. The oxygen tank had been completely destroyed, and the power system was severely damaged. Without enough oxygen or electricity, their chances of making it back home looked grim. Mission Control in Houston quickly went into crisis mode. Engineers and experts worked around the clock, trying to figure out how to save the crew. First priority was ensuring the astronauts had enough air to breathe. The explosion had damaged the life support systems, and the crew was losing oxygen fast. To conserve what little they had left, Lovell, Swigert, and Heiss were forced to shut down all non-essential systems, plunging the spacecraft into near-total darkness and freezing temperatures. The mission to land on the moon was immediately abandoned. Now, the only goal was survival. The lunar module, originally designed for a short stay on the moon, became their lifeboat. It had its own power and oxygen supply, but these resources were limited. Crew had to ration everything, even their water, to make it last. Every drop, every breath, and every watt of power had to be carefully calculated. One of the most critical challenges was navigating the spacecraft back to Earth. With the command module's navigation system offline, the crew had to rely on manual calculations and limited guidance from Mission Control. To make matters worse, the damaged spacecraft was leaking vital oxygen and water into space. Time was running out. As the astronauts worked tirelessly, tension on the ground grew. The world was captivated by the unfolding drama. Millions of people across the globe tuned in to follow every update, holding their breath, hoping for a miracle. The odds were stacked against them, but the determination of the astronauts and the ingenuity of the ground crew provided a glimmer of hope. One of the most dramatic moments came when the crew had to execute a critical engine burn to put them on the correct trajectory back to Earth. With no computer assistance, they had to time the burn perfectly. If they fired the engine for too long or too short, they could miss Earth entirely and be lost in space forever. Lovell used the Earth's horizon as a guide, and in a nail-biting moment, they performed the burn manually. It was a success, but their troubles were not over. As they neared Earth, the crew had to transfer back to the command module for re-entry. This module, now crippled and barely functional, was their only hope for surviving the intense heat of re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. The final obstacle was whether the heat shield, potentially damaged by the explosion, would hold. If it failed, they would burn up on re-entry. On April 17, 1970, 4 days after the explosion, the world held its breath as Apollo 13 re-entered Earth's atmosphere. communication blackout during re-entry lasted longer than expected, increasing the tension to unbearable levels. Then finally, the radio crackled with the voice of Lovell. "Houston, this is Odyssey. It's good to see you again." Against all odds, Apollo 13 splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. Crew was alive, and their safe return was celebrated around the world. Apollo 13 had been a mission of disaster, but it became a story of incredible human resilience, teamwork, and ingenuity. It remains one of NASA's finest hours, not for reaching the moon, for bringing 3 astronauts back from the brink of death.